Welcome to our kickoff event for Masculinities Week. We have a really fantastic series of events starting today and then continuing all through next week. Check out our posters in the quad or on the Center for Gender Equity website. But then tonight we have Dr. Michael Kimmel speaking on Mars, Venus, or Planet Earth, Men in the New Millennium. And without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Kimmel. Dr. Michael Kimmel is among the leading researchers and writers on men and masculinity in the world today. The author or editor of more than 20 volumes, his books include Changing Men, New Directions in Research on Men and Masculinity, Men Confront Pornography, The Politics of Manhood, The Gender of Desire, The History of Men, and most recently, Guyland, The Perilous World Where Boys Become Men. He also co-edited the Encyclopedia on Men and Masculinities and the Handbook of Studies on Men and Masculinities. His documentary history, Against the Tide, Pro-Feminist Men in the United States, 1776 to 1990, chronicled men who supported women's equality since the founding of the country, and has been described as meticulously researched and a pioneering volume, which will serve as an inspirational source book for women and men. Furthermore, his book, Manhood in America, A Cultural History, was hailed as the definitive work on the subject. In addition to his work as an author and lecturer, Dr. Kimmel is also a professor of sociology at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. I must also take a moment to acknowledge the role that Dr. Kimmel has played in my personal and academic development. As a sophomore here at Occidental, I read his article, Masculinity as Homophobia, as part of a sociology class. The article proved to be an epiphany. After years of struggling to fit in within masculine expectations, the article described everything that had always bothered me about masculinity in the male gender role, but that I lacked the language to express. Upon finishing the article, I knew that I had found my personal and academic passion. Thus, it is with great admiration that I present Dr. Michael Kimmel.
Very sweet introduction. So if you want to just summarize masculinity as homophobia, we can all just like go home. Really, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and also to kick off Masculinities Week. It's sort of the inverse, I guess, of Women's History Month, where most guys on most campuses figure that if they can just get through this month, they can get back to like business as usual, which is Men's History Months. It's a fabulous lineup, and I'm really happy to sort of be the kickoff speaker, and I'm going to be probably the most general of the speakers that you're going to have come. And one of the things I think you'll see, and so my job's going to kind of be to set the table for the other speakers who will be coming in to talk, for example, about pop culture, as Byron Hurt will do, violence, as Jackson Katz will do, pornography and sexuality, as Bob Jensen will do it. And one of the things I think you'll see if you watch this series develop over the next week is how diverse these voices actually are. That although we may all have a kind of similar politics, we would all say that we support gender equality, support feminism, and that'll be sort of the argument that I'm going to make tonight. But you'll also hear that we come at it from very different places with very different kind of politics. So you'll hear some of the differences among us as well. So this title, Mars and Venus or Planet Earth, you all know what that refers to, right? That refers to the book by John Gray called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Have any of you actually read that book? Well, not very many of you have read it, but virtually all of you know the argument, right? And the argument is that men and women are so fundamentally different that they might as well be from different planets. That any communication at all between women and men is an event of intergalactic proportions. Now here's the thing you probably don't know about that book. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is the best-selling self-help book in the history of the world. That book alone has sold 18 million copies in hardcover. Now that does not include the spin-off books, Mars and Venus in the boardroom, Mars and Venus in the bedroom, pretty soon it'll be Mars and Venus in the bathroom. You know, it doesn't include the baseball hats, pen and pencil sets, DVDs, CD-ROMs, videotapes, audio tapes, board games. There was a short-lived TV show, and my favorite, the therapy franchise. You can actually get trained to do Mars and Venus therapy. It takes 2 days. You go up to corporate headquarters in Marin, where else? And you know, you get trained to do Mars and Venus therapy, then you come back and hang out a shingle, and you know, then you send 10% to headquarters, sort of like a tithe. So that is, and everybody knows the argument. Everybody knows that men and women are so fundamentally, completely different. But here's the thing that's so interesting to me about that. Every day you're here at Occidental, you are living the refutation of that book. Now, how do I know that? It's my first trip here. What's the most successful educational reform of the entire 20th century? Co-education. And what does co-education assume? It assumes you can sit in the same class, listen to the same lecture, read the same book, take the same exam, be graded on the same criteria, and nobody ever goes to the dean of students and says, well, like, I'm a Martian and my professor's a Venusian, so like, don't I get extra credit? Or a translator? Nobody says that. And the reason nobody says that is because on every available, measurable trait, attitude, and behavior, women and men are more similar than we are different. The real story, by the way, is the differences among men and the differences among women, which are far greater, in fact, than any mean differences you might find between women and men. So, but do you think I could sell 18 million copies of a book called We're All Earthlings? I don't think so. I think there's something in our culture that makes us desperately want to cling, really tenaciously, to this idea of difference, fundamental biological difference. So the argument that I'm going to make to you tonight is a little bit different than that. I'm going to make the argument not only are we more similar than we are different on these attitudes, traits, and behaviors, but I'm going to make the argument that we are similar politically. That the very things that women have identified that will make their lives better are the very things men need to live the lives that men say they want to live. So I'm not going to be coming, you know, from one blue state to another to impose some kind of ideological feminist straitjacket on the freewheeling ideology of masculinity. Rather, I'm going to take men at their word. This is what men say they want. This is the only way that we'll get there. So I'm going to argue that there's no war between the sexes, no battle between the sexes, that gender equality is not a zero-sum game, but it's a win-win. So how will I do that? First thing I want to do is I want to suggest the ways in which we start the conversation about where men are. Well, I'm a sociologist, right? So, you know, you've taken a sociology course, or maybe a political science course, and you know, most public speakers, they like to lead off with a bunch of jokes. We social scientists, we like to lead off with some data. I have some.